Hello everyone, today we're going to cover the digestive system. We're going to start out from the mouth, right? We're going to go from the mouth all the way to the other end. So we start out with the salivary glands. And the first question is, why saliva? Why do we even have saliva? So functions, we're going to name those, and they are to keep mucous membranes moist. They are also going to inhibit bacterial growth. So anytime you have an entrance into the body, a way that bacteria can get in, we're going to have some mechanism to stop that bacterial growth. So that's the saliva that's doing that. It's also lubricating food and dissolving the food. And when it comes to digestion, it's actually beginning the digestion of only carbohydrates. So very limited digestion, but some is already happening there. So let's look at them. And 3 here. The parotid glands, which is the largest glands. They are very close to your ear, as you see in the diagram here. They secrete a really thick secretion, and it's going to be connected via a duct coming into the mouth here. And these are the ones, when inflamed, are creating the mumps that you're probably all vaccinated against and didn't have. I wasn't vaccinated because they didn't have a vaccine way back 200 years ago, and I remember getting the mumps. And so it's the inflammation of that parotid gland. You just look a little swollen like this kid here. So this side here is that inflamed parotid gland. Second, submandibular. So if it's submandibular, it's under the mandible. It secretes the largest, copious amounts of saliva, not as thick, much more watery, and it's going to contain buffers so that you are manipulating that acidity in the mouth, and containing ions. So here, submandibular gland, right under the mandible there, the most voluminous amount of saliva. And then the last one we're going to look at is this one under the tongue, sublingual. And it's the smallest of them all. And that's all I want to say about that one. This is a better picture that's showing sort of the glandular aspect of them. These are just secretory cells that are able to secrete this fluid. So let's move down into the pharynx. So food you're eating is going to come, or the bolus, we call it bolus, is going to enter the esophagus from the laryngopharynx. So we have directly across from the mouth is the oropharynx, directly across from the nose is the nasopharynx, and then the region where you have your Adam's apple is going to be the laryngopharynx. Once a food passes past that, that's a shared passageway. We talked about that, right, in respiratory. It's going to enter into the esophagus. And so this is a muscle. It is quite long. It's about 1 foot long, and it has both smooth and skeletal muscle in it. The upper walls is skeletal. You sort of have some control over that contraction of that esophagus. And then the lower, not so much. So this is food coming down from the esophagus and entering into the stomach. Now, you don't want food to be going back up where it came from. So there is a sphincter there called the cardiac sphincter. And the sphincter is where the muscles can actually contract and not let food go back up where it came from. Acid reflux is a condition where the food does go back. You don't want it to do that because the pH of the stomach is around 2, and it's very protective here. Protected by the mucus, but if this is going to backtrack, that pH 2 is going to be very corrosive here on the esophagus. So one sphincter is here at the entryway, that's the cardiac sphincter. We're going to have another sphincter at the exit, right? So it's not to let food too quickly into the intestine, into the duodenum, if it hasn't been churned enough. The sections here are the cardiac region where the sphincter is, the fundus, which is sort of the region above where the esophagus is coming in, the body, the pylorus, and the next sphincter here is the pyloric sphincter. So cardiac sphincter, pyloric sphincter. And then food is going to move on to the next portion. It's the beginning portion of the small intestine, and that is called the duodenum or duodenum. You can pronounce it either way. I always tell the story that when some 2-year-old accidentally swallows something, you're going to worry about 2 sphincters. Did it get caught in the cardiac sphincter? Did it get caught in the pyloric sphincter? And if it didn't, it's going to go out the other end, and you don't worry. That those 2 places are the tricky part of that hair clip or quarter or something that the kid was playing with in the mouth and ended up swallowing. This is what it looks like, a little more realistic than my last picture. So cardiac sphincter right there, pyloric sphincter right here, and all this here is the greater omentum, which is this fatty curtain that's going to cover the intestine. The lesser omentum is in the lesser curvature of the stomach. Greater omentum, greater curvature of the stomach. Let's look a little bit at the walls of this muscled organ. And there you're going to see these gastric glands and gastric pits. So it would look something like this. This looks like an eye, right, on a lizard or something. But it's the inner lining of the stomach where you would have this sort of pyloric, this pit that comes down. And along this sort of entryway are different types of cells that are found there. And those are parietal cells, mucous cells, chief cells, G cells. We're going to talk about those and what they're doing. First one is the parietal cell, and they're going to secrete hydrochloric acid. Why do you want hydrochloric acid? Because you need to bring that pH down in order for digestion to happen. Digestive enzymes that are going to be released from the pancreas and that are going to start the digestive process in the small intestine need to be at a low pH. If they're not at a low pH, they're not going to function. So these special parietal cells are going to secrete that hydrochloric acid of a pH of around 2, parietal. G cells, enteroendocrine cells, and they're going to secrete gastrin. So if it's an enteroendocrine cell, it's a hormone. And that is going to do what? It's going to stimulate those parietal cells to secrete that acid. So it's sort of tag team here. G cells telling those parietal cells to secrete it. They also secrete serotonin. Serotonin we think of as the sort of feel-good hormone, but it also increases the motility in the stomach. And it secretes histamine, which also stimulates hydrochloric acid secretion. And somatostatin. If it's a statin, it stops something, right? It inhibits something. So this is to inhibit gastric secretion and slow down digestion when there's no more food present. So you want all these things to be happening and being secreted, but when you stop ingesting, you want to slow that down, and you need to have something to put the brakes on it, and that's somatostatin. The next are the mucous cells, these up here that are closer to the neck of this pit here, and it's going to secrete mucus into this area, and these lower pink cells drawn in pink. So mucous cells secrete mucus, the chief cells are secreting pepsinogen, and pepsinogen is later going to be converted to pepsin. And pepsin is important in the digestion of protein. 2 P's, pepsin, protein. Okay, that's how you're going to remember. Pepsinogen is just what gives origin to that pepsin. It also is going to release gastric lipase, so it's going to digest fat. Super important. And these are all in the walls of this pit. Mechanical digestion goes on in the stomach, and so the food reaches the pylorus is chyme, that pyloric region. It has to be a mushed up substance that's now called chyme. So there's three layers of muscle there that are going to do this, and they're going to churn that stomach continually. Chemical digestion. Digestion of the proteins by pepsin and fats by lipase is what's sort of starting in the stomach to break these down. But when we start thinking of Is it really absorbed in the stomach, or is it just mechanical and some chemical breakdown? The question is, how much absorption happens in the stomach, if any? Well, the answer is very little. No food. That's not absorbed in the stomach. Is going to be absorbed later in the small intestine. But water is, electrolytes are, some drugs are, and therefore they warn you, eat this with food, right? This medication, you should eat this with food, because if not, it might damage the walls of the stomach. So you sort of mix it with food. Alcohol goes everywhere in the body. It crosses every single membrane and causes all sorts of trouble. You know that it causes trouble when it crosses membranes in the ear, because then your balance is upset, correct? So yes, some of that alcohol is absorbed right through the walls of the stomach. Moving on to the small intestine. This one is about 18 feet long, about an inch wide. And the first region is the duodenum, or the duodenum, which means 12 fingers. Duodenum means 12. 12 like this. So this would be 10, and then 2 more. That would be 12. So 12 fingers length. It's about 25 centimeters. And this is the very beginning portion of the small intestine. It's not very long. It's a small piece. Arriving there is very important. It's a common bile duct, so it's going to bring bile to break down substances, fats, and also the pancreatic duct. So the pancreas is going to dump into the duodenum all the enzymes that it needs to do, and bile is going to be dumped into that region. So now we're really working on digestion and absorption. This is a picture here of the duodenum, here in the pink. And the pancreas conveniently sits right next to it, because these digestive enzymes are coming from the pancreas and dumped into that region. Bile is coming from the gallbladder. It's manufactured in the liver, stored in the gallbladder, and it too will be dumped into this region of the duodenum. And now it's serious breakdown and absorption. Continuing on, you have stomach, duodenum, jejunum, ileum in green, and then colon, ascending colon, transverse colon, descending colon, sigmoid, and then rectum. See what more I want to tell you about this. Oh yeah, to remember the order: duodenum, jejunum, and ileum, is don't jump in. DJI, don't jump in if you get those confused. Oh, and here is the nice appendix coming off the cecum, which is this sort of dead end region of the ascending colon. I think I'm going to stop it there and pile on the small intestine into the next video. So thanks for listening.